Welcome back to my channel. As Black people, as Christians, we need to take our focus off who is the real Israelites, who is the real Jews, who is the fake Israelites, who is the fake Jews. We need to focus on the Bible itself, the whole Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. We need to keep our focus on Jesus. We need to focus on who our true enemy is, and that is Satan. The only thing he want to do is distract us. Satan came to kill, steal, and destroy. So we need to focus on the schemes of the devils in order to avoid them.
The Arab slave trade began when the Arabs first invaded North Africa in the 7th century. The Arabs' first entry point into North Africa was, of course, Egypt. The general Amir ibn al-As invaded Egypt in December 639 with a humble force of 4,000 men. According to the sources, these men belonged to the Arab tribe of Ak and partly to the tribe of Gafik. The troops also included some new converts of Roman and Persian soldiers. Ironically, the Muslim Caliph Omar, after allowing his general to leave to conquer Egypt, was having second thoughts, because he thought they surely couldn't conquer Egypt with a measly 4,000 men. So he wrote a letter to General Amir. If you receive this letter when you have already crossed into Egypt, then you may proceed. Allah will help you, and I will also send reinforcements as may be needed. The Arab general crossed into Egypt, received the letter, and proceeded to conquer the country. This was merely the beginning and the origin of the sweep across North Africa in the Arab invasion. The Arabs would then go on to conquer the Byzantium territories of Tunisia and western Libya, an area the Arabs themselves called Afriqiya. From their base in North Africa, early Arab rulers such as Aqba bin Nafi would impose a tribute of 360 slaves on whatever region he controlled. This tradition, of course, continued to develop and rapidly expanded into a much larger demand. To keep up with this demand, slaves had to be taken from further south, places like Mali, Senegal, Chad, and even northern Nigeria. After slavery was firmly established and very profitable, it became a sort of free-for-all for the Arab Berber Muslims. The 12th century Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela recorded that Arab slavers used to take wheat, raisins, and figs to the western Sudan, spread them across the ground near suitable settlements, and then seized and enslaved unsuspecting Africans as they came looking to purchase or inquire. This method was rare, but it just goes to show the lengths that Arabs would go to profit from the booming slave trade in North Africa. Large numbers of Africans were sent north, generally to serve as domestic servants or slave concubines. It's been estimated that from the 10th to the 19th century, some 6,000 to 7,000 slaves were transported north each year. The journey across the desert was, of course, absolutely brutal, and many Africans perished along the way. According to Henry Hamilton Johnston, who was a British explorer, he claims in his book that many slaves would be able to just reach the drinking place and then would sink down and die before the water reached their lips. Another primary source of slaves for the Arab world was on the eastern coast of Africa. This is where enslaved Africans known as the Zanj were in high demand. In general, enslaved African people were used for agriculture, labor, household help, or to be concubines or soldiers. The first direct evidence of a sizable Indian Ocean slave trade was when large numbers of East African male slaves labored on the plantations of the Abbasid Caliphate in Mesopotamia. Slaves exported by Arab traders to Southwest Asia, India, Indonesia, and China worked mainly as soldiers, concubines, and household servants. The expanse of the Arab slave trade was far-reaching. In fact, a 7th century Chinese text mentions ambassadors from Java presenting the Chinese emperor with two Seng Chi, or Zanj slaves, as gifts in 614. And 8th and 9th century chronicles mention Seng Chi enslaved Africans reaching China from the Hindu kingdom. These traders captured Bantu peoples largely from the interior of present-day Kenya, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Large slave markets developed in Zanzibar and Pemba, where at the height of the trade, as many as 15,000 to 20,000 slaves passed through annually. The slave trade became so significant that in 1840 the Sultan of Oman moved his seat of power to Zanzibar. In the East African interior, people such as the Nwezi, Ngoni, Yao, and Makua raided neighboring communities and sold their captives to Arab caravans, often in exchange for firearms. In addition to the many East African slaves sent to the distant shores of Arabia and the Persian Gulf, others remained as laborers on Arab plantations in East Africa, such as the Arab slave trade was absolutely devastating to African people. It was a trauma akin to the Atlantic slave trade. I'm not going to play oppression Olympics between the Atlantic slave trade and the Arab slave trade, but I'll simply say this. The Arab slave trade was at least 700 years before the Atlantic slave trade, was no less dehumanizing or horrific, and on top of that, it lasted much longer. One example of the shockingly dehumanizing character of the Arab slave trade comes from a British traveler to East Africa named David Livingstone. David Livingstone was a traveling British physician and Christian missionary in East Africa. He became very popular for his journey into Africa and writing on his experience. His first-hand eyewitness account of the Arab slave trade really increased his knowledge across the world. What he witnessed seems to have a great impact on him in a very disturbing way, and he makes it very clear how he felt about it. To overdraw its evils is a simple impossibility. We passed the slave woman shot or stabbed through the body and lying on the path. Onlookers said an Arab who passed early that morning had done it in anger at losing the price he had given for her, because she was unable to walk any longer. We passed a woman tied by the neck to a tree and dead. We came upon a man dead from starvation. The strangest disease I have seen in this country seems really to be brokenheartedness, and it attacks free men who have been captured and made slaves. Livingstone estimated that 80,000 Africans died each year before even reaching the slave markets of Zanzibar. All the horrors of the Atlantic slave trade can be found in the Arab slave trade. For whatever reason, the Atlantic slave trade is simply more popular. Some historians assert that as many as 17 million people were sold into slavery on the coast of the Indian Ocean, the Middle East, and North Africa, and approximately 5 million enslaved Africans were transported by Muslim slave traders via the Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and Sahara Desert to other parts of the world between 1500 and 1900. This history is important for us in the diaspora to understand. The report about Africans being enslaved in Libya is simply following a tradition that has survived since the 7th century. It is our job as Afro-descended people to be the light bearers for the dissemination of this knowledge, this history so unacknowledged or simply underrepresented.
In that video, you just seen how the Arabs who religion is Islam and they're Muslim, you see how they had black slaves way before white Europeans had slaves. The thing that gets me, because I did a video a while back and I said think about some things when I did that video, saying, because a lot of people were saying black people shouldn't be Christians because Christian is the religion of the white man. In that video I showed that Christian Abraham was a Hebrew, so Christianity is a descendant from a Hebrew. It's a Hebrew religion because Jesus come from the tribe of Judah and he had his teaching, which was called Christians following Christ. Because of that, it's not a white man religion. Christianity was on the continent of Africa before it ever hit Europe. Christianity was on the continent of Africa before Islam was ever on the continent of Africa. But you steady hear black people telling other black people to stay away from Christianity. Like I said, think about why they're saying that to you or to us. But what you never hear them say, you never hear them say a black person should not be a Muslim. A black person should not follow the Islam religion because it's the religion of the slave master. You seen in that video who the first slave master of Africans were before it was the European. But you never hear that conversation. Wonder why they're trying to turn black people away from God, why they're trying to turn black people away from Jesus.
Ryan Brown is CEO of Open Doors US. He joins us to explain. Ryan, what's happening to Christians in sub-Saharan Africa and why are the attacks worsening?
Great question. Yes, I think one of the primary reasons is that so many of these countries are already considered fragile states where governments do not necessarily have full control of what is going on in these countries. And therefore, in these countries, Christians can become easy targets. For those that are looking to create instability within those environments, Christians can often be targets that they can go against, that they can do so with impunity. They've received no consequence for those actions because, again, Christians are not often protected or recognized by the governments in those areas.
Although the overall global death numbers are down, I know you found that more than 82% of the Christians killed for faith reasons were in Nigeria. That's alarming. So why is the U.S. State Department not listing the country as one of particular concern?
That is a good question, and one that I think that there are probably many factors that could talk to many different folks and get many different opinions on that. But the reality is that Christians do suffer severely because of their faith in Nigeria. As you referenced, Nigeria alone, the number of people that have been killed because of their faith, that number surpasses all other countries in the globe combined. So truly an area where there's a lot of instability and a lot of need to be lifting up our brothers and sisters in prayer.
Where else in Africa are you concerned about?
Yeah, really throughout that area, there are some areas of encouragement. For example, we do see some changes in Mali that have given reasons for optimism. But really throughout that whole sub-Saharan area, there are alarming trends where we continue to see violence, and that violence not necessarily just characterizing those that have been martyred for their faith, but as well as violence perpetuated against Christians, whether those be physical attacks, whether it be attacks on houses of worship, whether that be actual personal residences of Christians. These numbers continue to grow at alarming rates.
I'm not going to read everything. I just want to read this part. Nigeria has become the second deadliest genocide country in the world, accounting for more than 150,000 religiously motivated, defenseless civilian deaths since 2009, the report states. It says about 100,000 Christians were among the 150,000 killed, while moderate Muslim accounts for about 46,000. And members of other religions accounts for the remaining 4,000 defenseless civilians' death. The report say the death toll in Nigeria is surpassed only by the number of in Syria, which has been embroiled in a devastating civil war since 2011, with civilian deaths of 306,000 out of about 21.5 million citizens. According to the report, the systematic murders of Christians in Nigeria amounts to a silent genocide, highlighting the absence of media coverage and the indifference of the global community. I remember seeing a post about the situation that's going on now with Israel and Palestine. And in that post, these people, the person was pro-Palestine, and they was calling American Christians hypocrite because they're saying that they're taking Israel's side, even though Israel is killing Christians in Palestine, and that Christians in America don't care. I guess they don't know that there's a watch group when it comes to Christians, that throughout the world, like what's going on in Africa, as well as Christians in other parts of the country, they know where these Christians are. A lot of them are underground, but they know where they are. It's a watch group. They know what's going on. They know the genocide that these Christians are facing. No one else seemed to care about what's going on with the Christian. All of a sudden, since what's happening in Palestine, it's like Christians are hypocrite because they're taking Israel's side. This whole situation is biblical. If you don't read the Bible or understand the Bible, you're not going to truly get it. Just like in the Bible, Jesus was speaking in parables. And he said he did it on purpose because not everyone is going to understand. And that's the same thing when it comes to the situation that's going on in Israel. When you look back in the Bible at Joshua 10:5, you understand the story about Moses bringing his people out of Egypt from slavery. You understand that before Moses was able to complete the journey and get his people to the promised land, he died and Joshua took over. So Joshua came in, they went to war with these different kingdoms and destroyed them, about the wall of Jericho and different things like that. So it was these 5 kings that came together in order to fight the Israelites at that time, because they were seeing that how strong they was and they didn't want them to defeat them. So they came together, 5 different kings of 5 different kingdoms came together to destroy Joshua and the Israelites. Fast forward it to 1948, when Israel became a state. Once that happened, the Arab-Israel War took place, and it was actually 5 Arab countries came together in order to destroy Israel because they didn't want them to be a state. And that was Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Libya, and Syria. Just like in the Bible, when those 5 kingdoms came against Joshua, Joshua was able to defeat them with the help of God. That's the same thing that happened when these 5 countries came up to fight Israel. Israel, a smaller country, was able to defeat them, those 5 different countries. If you don't believe in God, you're not going to believe the act of God and that it was biblical. And everything that's going on now over there is biblical. So it's more than just the land, or they stole the land, or the Jewish people are not really the true Jews. They stole the black people, the black Hebrew Israelites. They stole their identity. It goes far beyond that. And like I said, you have to read the whole Bible to truly get an understanding of what's really going on. And the other thing we have to also remember as black people and also Christian, the same people that has no problem wiping Israel off the face of the earth, the radical Islam, are the same people who's killing the Christians in Africa and who has no problem trying to wipe them off the face of the earth. The same people that wanted to gas, the Holocaust and all that, because of they felt that the Jewish people was the scum of the earth. They are the same people that hated black people because of their skin color.
This long-established ethnic diversity and pluralism within German society was seen as an existential threat by the Nazis after they took control of the country in 1933 under the fascist leadership of Adolf Hitler. Their hateful ideology glorifying the racial supremacy of the so-called Aryan race meant anyone of African descent was instantly viewed as a racially inferior, undesirable, and dangerous other. Stamping out this perceived insult and contamination to their delusional vision of an ethnically pure Volk became an obsessive priority for the new regime's toxic mix of institutionalized racism, anti-Semitism, ableism, and nationalism to target relentlessly. Through a series of draconian laws, policies, and propaganda, the Nazis began the process of segregating, excluding, dehumanizing, and ultimately trying to destroy Germany's black population and the centuries-old communities they had built. Despite the systematic oppression, violence, and dehumanization they faced, many in the Afro-German community continued to resist and assert their identity, finding strength in community solidarity and a refusal to be erased from their homeland's cultural fabric. Underground networks provided vital mutual aid and support systems to help families and individuals survive and maintain some semblance of normalcy under the increasingly repressive conditions imposed by the Nazi state. Small acts of defiance, from continuing to wear traditional African clothing to hosting secretive gatherings to celebrate customs, rituals, and milestones, became important symbolic acts of resilience in the face of the regime's efforts to eradicate their very existence as a community of people. One of the very first legal offensives was the law for the restoration of the professional civil service, rammed through in April 1933. This allowed the dismissal of non-Aryans like Jews, Afro-Germans, and other minorities from government jobs, as well as influential positions in spheres like education, healthcare, media, and culture. This single stroke effectively robbed the Black community of much of its socio-economic mobility, professional workforce, and intellectual creative class overnight. It sent a chilling message about the marginalization that lay ahead under the racist Nazi regime's doctrine of racial purity. Just 2 years later, in 1935, the notorious Nuremberg race laws further embedded this racist agenda into an inhumane legal framework still remembered as one of the most racist policy moves by a modern nation state. The law for the protection of German blood and honor banned marriages between Jews and others deemed non-Aryan. But the Reich citizenship law proved even more pernicious by stripping all non-Aryans of their full citizenship rights and rendering them as mere subjects of the Reich. For Afro-Germans, some of whom could trace their lineages and ties to the country over centuries, this was a devastating body blow. They were officially turned into second-class non-citizens, outcasts on their own soil with extremely limited rights and legal protections. Vicious propaganda simultaneously dehumanized and scapegoated the Black peril as a dangerous, corrupting influence on the twisted vision of racial supremacy. Black Germans saw themselves turned into racial problems that needed to be solved through elimination and erasure, in line with Nazi racial ideology. They were systematically driven out of housing, higher education, civil jobs, and the public sphere through racist segregation, enforced through new legal diktats and institutions like the feared Gestapo secret police. Existing for them became a daily act of struggle, humiliation, and dehumanization. Worse, the Nazi regime outlawed and criminalized interracial relationships as part of its drive to preserve the sanctity of German blood. Those in interracial unions faced harassment, arrests, and potentially being sent to brutal prisons and concentration camps for their race betrayal. It was clear the Reich's ultimate goal was to eliminate any Black presence and identity in the society. It was pathologically trying to ethnically re-engineer in line with its cult of Aryan supremacy. In one of its most grotesque and disturbing policies, the Nazi regime doubled down on its poisonous obsession with racial pseudoscience and ethnic purity by implementing forced sterilization programs, specifically targeting Afro-Germans between 1933 and 1945. The disgusting aim was to prevent German citizens of African descent from being able to have children so that the Black population would inevitably shrink over generations through a form of slow-motion genocide sanctioned by the state. Thousands of Afro-German men and women were forcibly sterilized against their will through cruel procedures like surgical sterilization. Facilities conducted unethical, torturous experiments to sever fallopian tubes in women or render men infertile by removing their testicles. The physical and psychological trauma was immense, compounded by the loss of human dignity and reproductive rights, as healthy individuals were stripped of their most basic biological freedoms in the name of racial supremacist pseudoscience. The Nazis also implemented monstrous euthanasia programs to eliminate those they deemed as racial, genetic, or mental defectives who didn't fit their deranged concept of Aryan purity. The notorious Action T4 campaign rebranded outright murder as an act of state-sanctioned mercy. Many of African descent found themselves targeted, forcibly institutionalized, and then systematically killed through methods like gassing, lethal injections, and deliberate starvation. Those with disabilities or conditions were deemed less than human and deserving of extermination. While there was no outright campaign of industrialized genocide against Afro-Germans on the scale of the Jewish Holocaust and its death camps, the cumulative effects of all these oppressive Nazi policies caused Germany's Black population to plummet drastically within just over a decade. From an estimated 20,000, 25,000 in the Weimar era of the 1920s, by 1945, the black population had dwindled to just a few hundred traumatized individuals after over a decade of relentless marginalization, loss of rights, and bodily autonomy. An entire community that had established deep, multi-generational roots over centuries and contributed immensely to German society was pushed to the very brink of erasure by the Nazis' pathological pursuit of their racist ideology of ethnic supremacy and hatred of the other.
So you seen in that video, and I also did a video about the same thing a while ago, but you see in this particular video that I just shared with you, that black people suffered at the hand of Hitler as well. Black people was experimented on, just like the Jewish people was, at the hand of Hitler. They wanted to gas all the Jewish people to get rid of them, but they wanted to perform surgeries as far as tubular ligation and cutting off male balls so they couldn't reproduce. And they knew eventually if that continued on, they would get rid of the whole population. They hated also the children that these people produced. These the German children that was half black and half German. They hated them as well. And some of them also had surgical procedures done on them so they could not reproduce and have kids. So for Kanye to say he hold Hitler in high esteem, he liked Hitler because of this, that, and the other, you're not honoring the people that look just like you. Hitler would have killed you also if you would have been over there during his time, because he did not, and he did not like black people. And so that's why he wanted to extinguish them, just like he wanted to do the Jewish people. And then when the Hebrew Israelites make a statement saying the Holocaust never happened, he's not just diminishing what happened to the Jewish people, they are also diminishing what happened to the black people. So you're taking them, the same thing you're accusing the Jewish people of doing, of stealing or taking your inheritance, or taking away who you are, or stealing who you are. When you say Holocaust never happened, you're stealing history. You're taking away history from these black people who suffer. So to say that the Holocaust never happened, what about all these other black people that suffered at the hand of Hitler during the Holocaust? The Holocaust happened. And unfortunately, everybody who Hitler deemed as undesirable, and it wasn't just Jewish people dying, it wasn't just black people dying, it was gypsies, it was handicapped people, it was mentally disturbed people. All these people Hitler seen as undesirable and wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth because he wanted an Aryan race. He wanted what he saw as a pure race. So any black person that holds Hitler in high esteem, if your behind was back there during that time, you would not be here today. If your kids would have been back there and they would have been, regardless of who they would have been, he would have killed them too. So to adore a man, or hold a man like that in high esteem, is not just a slap in the face to Jewish people, it's also the slap in the face to black people, people who look just like you. And you wonder why sometimes it's hard to support black people when you hear the things they say, and when you see that they would rather push down the true information and push out a lie and want you to follow a lie instead of giving you the full truth of what's going on. Like I said, it's all a ploy to take black people away from God. They don't want black people following God. And it's a sad thing that it's a lot of black people are the ones that are doing that to other black people, because they want to have control over them. They want to manipulate them and say, oh, hate, 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 when the Bible teaches us not to hate. But if you feel that someone stole something from you, if you feel that you should be in this position and you're not because this is what somebody else did to you, what's going to happen? After a while, you're going to have hate in your heart for those people. When the Bible says, love your enemies, pray for your enemies, don't hate your enemies, because hate will take you down instead of lifting you up. Love is what lifts you up. And that's what God is about, love. So he wants you to be on a higher plain. He don't want you to worry about all this other stuff that's going around. That's why when you see what Jesus said, he will deal with it. When you see in Revelations and Jesus is talking about the synagogue of Satan, he's going to deal with everything. Because can you really say, if you're looking at DNA, can you really say that your genetics come from the Hebrews, one of the 12 tribes? Can you say that without a doubt that you are from one of the 12 tribes? You can't. Just like the Jewish people who say they are Jews, can they honestly say what 12 tribes they represent? Can they say I'm from the tribe of Judah? Can they say I'm from the tribe of Benjamin? Can they say I'm from the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Ephraim? Can they honestly say what tribe they come from to say that, yes, I am a true Jew, whether you think you're a black Hebrew Israelite or you are a white Jew? Can you really say what tribe you came from? No, you can't. And the sad part is, like, before I get into that, let me just read Revelation 2:9-11 ESV. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for the 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. And then we have Revelation 3:8-13 ESV. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patience, endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have. So I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem which come down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And this is Jesus talking to two different churches. This is what I want you to understand and pay attention to when you read that. The devil tests people, and God allowed the test to happen. The first test you see in the Bible was with Adam and Eve. There was no issue with Eve talking to the serpent. She did not commit a sin by talking to the serpent. She committed a sin as soon as she ate the fruit. Then you see another test with Jesus. When Jesus is getting ready and he's has been fasting for 40 days, Satan came to test him. And you see in the Bible it says he was sent there to be tested. So he went there and was tested, and Satan tried to get him to do all these things, but he came at Satan with scripture. So Jesus passed his test. Then you see with Job. Job is minding his own business, living his best life. He is very wealthy. He has nothing to worry about. And then Satan comes and he tests Job. Job, even though Job lost everything, he remained faithful to God. And so Job passed his test. we are also going to be tested because there's nothing new in this world. God and Jesus, they never change. We are going to be tested. And so the questions as Christians, will you pass the test? Or would you allow to get a conversation to take you in a different direction than God wants you to go? The command that Jesus gave us as Christians, as believers, as followers, is to go out into the world and preach the gospel. He never put us on the duty of who is the real Jews, who is the fake Jews. That is the conversation that you're having with the devil, and the devil is, you're allowing the devil to distract you. Think about this. God sent Jesus so that whoever believes in him will have everlasting life and will never die. So there were some Jews that rejected that because they did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. But then there was other Jews who knew what tribe they came from. Peter knew what tribe he was from. Paul, he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Even Judas was from the tribe of Judah. So these are Christian men who knew what tribe they was from, but they denounced following the Mosaic laws in order to convert over to Christianity. So who are you to not know for sure what bloodline you are, and you're worried about who are real Jews and fake Jews? You don't even know if you're a real Jew or a fake Jew or not, or a real Israelite, a Hebrew Israelite. You cannot honestly say if you are. So these Jewish people are willing to let go of the Mosaic laws to follow Jesus. You can't do the same thing because of a conversation, because of documentation. Go back to the beginning of the Bible in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve had everything they could have ever wanted. It was even gold in the Garden of Eden. There was all types of fruit trees and that they could eat from. They never wanted anything. They never had to work. They never had to do anything. Everything was given to them. God would come and walk and talk with them. They had the presence of God with them. But one conversation changed all that, because they started focusing on one thing that they thought was better than everything else they had. One tree. The snake convinced them that one tree was better than all the other trees they had. Here we are as Christians. We have salvation through Jesus. Jesus said, you are the ones that God gave me, and I am a good shepherd. I will lose none of my sheep. So if you're choosing to follow Jesus, you already know you got to end to heaven. You already know that you're going to be the ones that's going to make it to heaven. But instead of focusing on that, you want to be a Jew. You want to be an Israelite. Having a key to heaven is not good enough. Having an entrance to heaven is not good enough, because you're more focused on, we're the real Israelites. We're the real Hebrews. They have stuff. You're going in a different direction. Jesus is over here saying, spread my word, spread the gospel, follow me. Don't have hate in your heart, love. But you over here on duty of who is the real or the fake. Look at the things that the Jewish people are going to go through according to the Bible. Every Jewish person that reject Jesus is saying what they're going to go through in the Bible. And that's what you want? Instead of accepting Jesus? Like I said, I explored that information. I looked into that information. But there was never one time that I said, oh, I'm no longer a Christian. I'm a Hebrew. I was always a Christian, because I'm thinking to myself, how do I know that my bloodline actually lead to one of those 12 tribes? I don't. But I know if I accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, if I repent for my sins, that's my King. And he's going to get me into heaven, because there's no other way to the Father but through Jesus. So I'm going with Jesus to get to the Father. And so as Christians, that's the mindset we need to have. Stop chasing that one tree in the garden that you think is better than all these other trees when you already got it in. In Revelation, you see what Jesus said. You're going to be tested. Don't fail the test. Don't be one of these people that walks up to Jesus and be saying, Lord, Lord, and Jesus looking at you like, I don't know you. I never knew you. well, Jesus, we went to find out who was the real Hebrews and the real this, and we did. I didn't send you on that assignment. You did all that for yourself. You didn't do it for me. You did it for yourself. Jesus not worried. If Jesus and God is all knowing, don't you think they know who's who? So why do we have to worry about that? All you're doing is falling in the traps of Satan. And why even hate Jewish people? And even for the Jewish people, why hate Christians? Or why have a disdain for black people or a disdain for Christians? I'm not saying all of them have that feeling, but sometimes the way Jewish people talk, they talk as if they're up here. When they talked about the Holocaust, and I mentioned that in the other video, they talk about as if they're the only one that suffered in the Holocaust, like no black person or no other person suffered in the Holocaust. And I understand how sometimes that could be frustrating because no, we all suffer. I said it in that video and I said it to now. You cannot have American history without black people, but you cannot have world history without black people because we were everywhere. Every time you look at something going on, there's a black person there somewhere in some way, shape, or form. Remember the man who carried the cross for Jesus? Wasn't he black? So you can't have history. You can't have biblical history. You can't have American history. You can't have world history and not have a black person there on the scene because we're everywhere. And so why should you as black people feel like you're not getting something from God or you're not getting something from Jesus when you have everything that you would ever need? You have the Holy Spirit in you. You are a Christian. You have the Holy Spirit in you, which is part of who Jesus is, which is part of who God is. So you have everything, but you're still not satisfied because you want to be something that doesn't guarantee a spot in heaven.
Much of that terror directed at Christians. Enoch Iohanna was one of Aisha's neighbors.
They started with burning of the churches, killing the pastors, and killing the members, closing them down. On 29 September 2014 was the day that they attacked my village. Around 10, I have a call that they have killed my dad. They asked him to deny Christ, in which he refused. They have cut his right hands. Then he refused. They have cut to the elbow again, in which he refused before they shot him thrice at the head, forehead, the neck, and chest.
Many of the 1,500 Christians living in this camp have similar stories.